Hello, it's Levins here, and I'm here to read pages 8 through 10 of Quakes with you. And while you're reading, we are looking for places where the author uses figurative language or descriptive language to talk about the characters, the setting, or different story elements. At the next corner, Jacob could hear the horses whinnying. All the animals are skittish, he thought. That's strange. When he reached First Street, Jacob turned north, but the dog darted off in the direction of the waterfront. Jacob slapped his legs, crouched down, and whistled. Finally, he coaxed the dog back to his side. When they reached Market Street, Jacob picked up the dog and carried it in his arms for a few blocks. It was so fidgety, Jacob was afraid it might dash under the wheels of a wagon. The sky lightened from charcoal to smoky gray, and the street lights began to dim. As Jacob hurried toward the produce district, the dog squirming became frantic. It thrust its hind legs against Jacob's chest and leaped. When it hit the ground, it let out a loud, shrill yelp. "What's wrong, fella?" Jacob said. "We're going to see Uncle Avi. Avi, come on." The dog ran a few yards towards the docks, then turned and barked again. "Not down there, fella," Jacob said. "This way." He trotted up the hill toward the produce district. The dog stood, undecided. Over his shoulder, Jacob coaxed, "Come on, fella, this way." At last the dog padded to Jacob. Side by side, they ran the rest of the way to Washington Street. The produce district was already alive with activity. Jacob saw horses tethered to wooden wagons standing along both sides of the street. Men in overalls were unloading crates and sacks. Jacob breathed in the earthy smells of the soil and horse flesh. He passed a wagon heaped high with bulging bags of potatoes and onions. A merchant rushed toward him carrying a stack of egg cartons, and Jacob stepped aside to let the man pass. As Jacob hurried toward the spot where his Uncle Avi always set up his cart, he started to feel dizzy. His stomach churned, and he thought he was going to be sick. Jacob wondered if Papa was right and the dog had been trembling because of a disease. The ground started to sway. Bending his knees, Jacob tried to ride the movement. The street heaved and rolled like the ocean during a storm. It was as though a giant sleeping below the cobblestone had suddenly decided to get up. Buildings began weaving in and out, and the street pitched like an angry sea. Jacob took a step forward and fell. He heard a wagon overturn and crates thud to the ground. Raising himself on all fours, he tried to make sense of what was happening. This is an earthquake, he realized. It'll be over in a few seconds. Jacob remembered several earthquakes and how the ground seemed to roll. Sometimes dishes had fallen off shelves, but in an instant, the quakes had been over. The street continued to heave and roll. Jacob's ears filled with a roar as loud as thunder. In the gray light, he saw the cobblestone street split down the middle. A ditch several feet across opened. As Jacob watched, the ditch yawned wide, thinned to a slit, and gaped apart again. Bricks were raining all over the street, and the roar was deafening. "I've got to get under something," Jacob thought. Holding his arms over his head, he rushed toward an open building. He stumbled, then forced himself upright. Something rammed against his legs, and Jacob saw the dog. He could see its mouth moving up and down, but he could not hear it barking. Jacob tried to make his way toward the building again, but the dog tripped him. Frantic, Jacob changed direction and ran toward the other side of the street. A great cracking noise came from behind him. He whirled in time to see the front wall of the building collapse in a heap, the air filled with clouds of dust. All along the street, buildings rattled and lurched. Chunks of masonry hit the ground and broke into pieces. Window glass shattered. The columns of a nearby building buckled and crashed. Carts overturned, littering the sides of the street, and frantic horses struggled to free themselves from their reins. The dog jumped on Jacob's thigh, pushing him backwards against a collapsed wagon. A pair of horses stampeded through the streets toward them. They dragged a broken cart, which lurched from side to side and slammed into piles of fallen bricks. Jacob could feel his heart pounding inside of his chest as he squeezed himself against the side of the heavy wagon, hoping it would give him some protection. He reached for the dog and held its trembling body close to his chest. The crazed horses careened by, missing them by just a few feet. The roaring drowned all other sounds. Crouching beside the wagon, holding tight to the dog, Jacob watched the cobblestones vibrate and buildings cave in. The ground shook with such violence that Jacob thought the world was coming to an end. There's a picture of the crazed horses careening by, missing them by just a few feet. I wish I had a dog like that. That dog really came in clutch. I think maybe even saved his life. All right, don't forget to use this video to answer your questions. And if you have any questions or concerns or have anything that you're curious about, be sure to reach out to your teacher. I hope you guys have a great day. Peace.